This is The Water Table.
A chance to hear the agricultural side of these issues.
Place for people to go find information and education.
Water management is just going to become even more critical into the future.
How misunderstood what we do is.
I would encourage people to open their minds and listen to this dialogue.
Welcome, everybody, to the Water Table Podcast. Today I have a fun guest with me, Kellie Blair. Kellie is a farmer with her husband, AJ, in Dayton, Iowa, or near Dayton, Iowa. And she's got a great story for us just around their journey in agriculture and the different things that they do. Not all just common commodity crops. They're doing some different things with their commodity crops. And just wanted to visit with Kellie today and talk about some of the practices they're doing on their farm and also some of the accolades that have come along with that. So, Kellie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Dayton, Iowa, why don't you start with that? Tell our listeners kind of where is Dayton, Iowa?
So Dayton is about an hour and a half north of Des Moines. And if you know where Fort Dodge is, we're about 25 to 30 miles south of Fort Dodge.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of in the, let's say, I call Fort Dodge West Central Iowa, pretty much. Is that right?
I never
20?
know where to call us because
Okay.
if I call it North Central, people get mad because they're in North Central and I'm not. And if you call it West Central, they might not like it. So we're kind of in the middle.
Yep.
Sort of.
Yep. My days from traveling Iowa as a traveling tile salesman back in the day was Dayton Farm Drainage was right in Dayton, Iowa. So I know where it is. So
it's still around.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Good. So you and your husband met in college. Both attended Iowa State University, correct? Yes.
He was out of college and I was still attending. And it was a rainy spring night and we met at a local watering hole. So.
Okay, good. So tell us a little bit about, your journey as I'm assuming Dayton was probably that area of farm for your husband, AJ, was home. Is that correct?
Yep. We're the fourth generation on the farm here.
On the farm. So you guys got married and ended up back in Dayton and, taking over the family farm, the legacy there. And Tell me just a little bit about the early years and how that went and your, how you've gotten to where you are today and through that process.
Yeah, it's been a process, and I guess time flies when you're having fun is what they say, right?
Right.
When we first started farming, we were pretty much corn on corn, conventional tillage. We did have pigs, and it was a pretty simple operation. Today we're very diversified. So we have corn and your soybeans, but we also do small grains and hay. We have pigs still for livestock, but we also have a cow-calf operation as well as a feedlot. So we have quite a bit going on a lot more of the year anyway. And our focus throughout all of that is conservation and continual improvement is kind of where we're at right now anyway.
Sure. And you guys, your farm was sponsored by the Iowa Land and Stewardship along with the EPA for a water retention project. Tell me about that, and let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship and EPA, along with the Iowa Soybean Association, they're going to be the ones collecting the data with this project. But we're a pilot project, I think one of 3 in Iowa. And the idea behind drainage recycling is just that you capture water that's coming off of your farm, that's drained off of your farm, store it in a pond, and you irrigate it back onto that land. The benefits should be yield. You should get an increase in yield, but then the water quality benefits that go along with that by slowing the water down, helping with flood mitigation, recycling nutrients, and that type of thing is kind of what we're looking at to see if the project, obviously it's a really big investment for farmers. And so the goal is to see, is this worthwhile to do? in the future. And so we're really excited. This will be our first year. This coming year will be the first year that we'll be able to get to use it. So cross our fingers, everything will go well this year. But our pond in particular, actually, our tile water, we couldn't dig it deep enough to actually gravity flow our tile water into it. So we are pumping from a tile main underneath the pond. We're pumping it into the pond. It's about 20 foot of water, 3¼ acres or so. It should have enough water for 3 inches for about 130 acres. So it should be interesting to see. We're excited to use it.
So is that 130 acres all tiled then? Is that the amount of tiled area, and then you're irrigating over the same acres then?
Yep, we are. So.
Yep. And that when you say 20 feet of water, so is that 20 acre feet? Is that how that correlates?
That's a good question.
Neither one of us are engineers, so we'll leave that one alone. But I think so. But I mean, the point is even in Dayton, Iowa area, probably wasn't as dry as further west Iowa this year, but you got pretty dry, right? This summer.
Correct.
And so, I'm sure you would have loved a 3-inch rain at any time, and it should be interesting to see how this goes and having that available. Being able to time that water, I think is going to be an important part of managing it to get that when we need it, where we can't always count on Mother Nature helping us out that way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So how are you guys, your family, selected for this process? Was this something that you had heard about and you entered into saying, hey, we might be interested in this, or how did this all go?
It was completely by happenstance. I was at an Iowa Soybean Research Conference, and a gentleman from IDOLS came up to me and said, hey, we're looking into doing this project. Would you be interested? And I had no clue where it might go or what it would look like, but I said, yes, put us down for it. We'll figure it out. And it's just one of those opportunities that come along, and I think it was kind of scary to say yes, but it's going to be really neat when it's all said and done.
For sure. And how often does that, I suppose you may not even know, being that this is a new process, but how often will that pond retain water? Will you pull it down all the way during the summer, or?
That's a good question. We'll hopefully find that out. I know Iowa Soybean Association will be putting in, soil moisture monitors and things. And so I'm really hoping we get some guidance on timing and things like that, because that's something in Iowa we don't have a ton of that where we're at right now. Sure.
I've actually had the opportunity to see a couple of these projects, one in particular in Manitoba, and kind of the same thing where, they were growing potatoes and it was a sandier soil, and they could take about 3 inches of rain or water, in substitution for rain each year, and it really changed the dynamics of that farm because of the rain patterns and the sandier soil. They're kind of guaranteed, they drained it, so they had their water figured out. If there was too much, they had their drainage in place, and there wasn't enough, they had their pond and irrigation. So, that's usually one of those intangibles you cannot control, and they kind of had control of it. So I really look forward to hearing more about this from you and seeing some of the things that are going to be in some of the publications as time goes on about this. It's a neat concept, and wish you guys really well with that.
Thank you. I hope it goes well, because I think it has a lot of potential, especially with weather patterns the way they've kind of been. You get pretty wet and then you get pretty dry. So, if we can help downstream water quality, yields, productivity, I think it'd be really neat to, create a solution out of what's going on.
Sure. Let's talk about cover crops. Another thing that you're doing on your farm, and cover crops. I think if we're having this conversation 3 or 5 years from now, it's going to be a much more common topic amongst all farmers. But you guys are on the leading edge of this, and I'm personally really curious to hear your story on this and how they grow. I think, being up here in Minnesota, our growing season is even a little shorter than Dayton, Iowa. But it's coming, and how is it going to work? I want to learn more. So tell me about your experience.
We've been doing cover crops for probably about 15 years. We've been kind of trialing it. And as with everything that we try on our farm, we always say kind of start small to try to learn your way through it. And that's exactly what we did. I think the first time we ever seeded cover crops was with our four-wheeler on, I don't remember how many acres. It was supposed to be a trial with Soybean Association, but it didn't. I don't think we ended up getting any data out of it. But right now, where we're at is we grow seed beans for Pioneer, and we grow a lot of non-GMO soybeans. So weed control right now is a really big thing. So we're attempting to use cover crops right now as a little bit of weed control in those non-GMO where we don't have a lot of tools in our toolbox to control those weeds. And so ahead of even any commercial soybeans that we do, we try to get cover crop in the ground in the fall ahead of it. So we've done all the different methods of cover crops. We've used airplane, we've used a Hagie highboy, and then right now a majority of it is we drill, and it's all cereal rye pretty much. We've gotten a lot of success with cereal rye. The mixes I think are good if we had time to manage it maybe a little bit more to get it on at a more optimal time. But right now we got to focus on getting the cash crop out, and the cover crop is secondary to that. And so we try to get in as much as we can. Drilling it has been a really good deal. It either might grow in the fall depending on weather, but majority of the time there's not a lot of fall growth, and it's spring growth, a really pretty good spring growth a lot of years. And it's really variable. So even though we've done it for about 15 years, we're still kind of trying to learn our process and exactly how it works. But, continual improvement and conservation were our goal. And so we know the benefit it has to soil, to water, and we know there's a lot of programs available to us to utilize to try to help us along. And so we're just kind of committed to trying to make it work, because like you said, in the future, it's an up and coming thing. You hear about it everywhere you go. Any article you see, you hear about cover crops. And so we're pretty committed to making it work. And right now ahead of corn, we've kind of held off on that. We've done trials through Soybean Association ahead of corn and ahead of soybeans. And corn is what did I hear in the last conference? Corn is a princess crop. And so it's a little bit more finicky on keeping everything good for it to make sure the yield is good. So we don't have the time quite yet right now to try to manage it ahead of corn, to make sure we get it killed ahead of time, to make sure that, all the issues that might come with killing it after we plant it, there's a lot of issues that could come. So we know that we could potentially hurt yield ahead of corn. And so we just have to kind of take our time to get there. But ahead of soybeans, it works really well. You can do a lot ahead of soybeans. Soybeans will kind of just grow.
Yeah. Have you been able to see the difference in soil health on your farm, with cover crops?
Yeah, I think this is not research based. This is what we see as farmers for sure. But between no-till and cover crops, we see a good couple days every spring and fall that we're able to get in the field, whereas full tillage neighbors might not. And I don't know. I attribute it in my head to walking through a lawn versus walking through a mud driveway. If you walk through a lawn when it's wet, you're pretty well just fine. But if you walk through a muddy driveway when it's wet, your boots are caked with mud and things like that. So it really has kind of mellowed out our soil, and we're again learning our way through reduced tillage we don't do any tillage ahead of soybeans. Corn, we're trying to figure that out. We're really not wanting to do tillage if we don't have to ahead of corn, but again, it's a different process ahead of corn. But we see a lot of good things in our soils happening, and we're doing research with Iowa Soybean Association to hopefully be able to actually quantify those things too.
Sure. So tell me about, it's interesting when you talk about getting in the field a little earlier than your neighbors that might have conventional tillage, but how much of your farm do you have adequate water management on and proper water management, would you say?
A lot of our farm, we have our own tiling machine, backhoe, and all of that. So that's why we actually started small grains, is so then during the summer we can get out and do tiling instead of fall or spring where we have very little time to do it. And so we try to put in a little bit every year on our landowners and our own land. And so that's kind of first and foremost when we're thinking about increasing yield. That's where the focus is if we get good drainage in there, we know that's going to pay for itself.
Yeah, I've always been under the impression, and it makes a lot of intuitive sense to me, but around the cover crop situation it's the right thing to do, but if you don't have your water management plan and your tiling done, it's going to be really challenging for that ground to be ready to go in the spring.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, there are some of those challenges. We have dark soils, but like you said, if it's drained, it's pretty easy to do a lot of things. Sure.
Well, lots going on, and you guys, as you said, we try things, and we try again, we experiment with this, and it might not work, and then we do something different. And I know you guys have cattle, and you're talking about non-GMO beans and cover crops, and now this project. But you also have a couple of kids, and you're married with children, and you're living in all of the stuff that comes with that, just like other people. But you're also farming and own your own business. And I've been spending some time with different people that are city dwellers lately, and they are always saying, if I could ever figure out a way to live on the farm, I would do that. If I could figure out a way to live rural and make a living in rural America, I'd do that. So just tell me a little bit about your, what's a day in the life like for Kellie and her family? I see one of them walking by there behind you, so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
That's part of the day in the life, right?
I think he had lunch, first lunch at around noon, then got called back out, and then came back in. So a day in the life is, there is no day in the life because they're all different. I think that's one of the main ones on the farm. I grew up on a farm, and I always tell people it's a lot different being a farmer's wife and a farmer versus being a farmer's daughter. You really don't know the stressors that happen. My parents did a good job of making it look, I guess, easy, because it's pretty hard. In rural Iowa, I guess the grass is always greener on the other side, because I look at, some people who live in town, and to be able to get to the stores easier. We have a local grocery store, but it's pretty limited on what they have, and I try to support them, but as prices go higher, it gets harder and harder. And our school district, I think, is one of the biggest in geography in the entire state of Iowa, and there's not a lot of students in the school. I think classes graduate with around 60 or 70. I might be wrong, but it's rural, and I think I wouldn't trade it for anything. I really enjoy being on the farm and being able to have our own business and kind of figure out where we want to go with our business and make our own decisions. It's stressful, it's risky, it's scary, but it's also pretty fulfilling to be able to say that we're raising in this house that we live in. I think my husband's grandfather was born in this office that I'm currently sitting in. We're raising the 5th generation in the same house. And so I think, there's a lot of the history that goes behind it. But at the end of the day, I think most business owners kind of know what we're going through. It might be a different situation in what we do every day, but it's at the end of the day, it's still a business, and our goal is to make it sustainable in whatever ways we can.
I don't know why I just thought of this, but as I'm listening to you too, I think there's a certain entrepreneurial spirit that you kind of have to have in your DNA to be a business owner, whether that's a farmer or, to start something new. And, I read a book not too long ago about a guy that I won't get into all the details, but that was a very successful businessman, and somebody else was telling the story from their perspective. They were with them, and they were on an airplane, and it was snowing. They were leaving Minneapolis is where they were leaving, and he was most excited because there was snow on the runway, and they were going to be able to. There was no tracks in front of them to take off from the runway, and he related that back to just that's kind of the spirit that this guy had, and that you kind of have to have is you got to be able to be willing to take that step out into the open frontier. And when I listen to your story and what you're doing a lot of that I think is going to be beneficial to future generations of farmers, not just your family, but of farmers, with what we're going to need to do if we want to be good stewards of what we have. And we're going to create better water quality. We got to do some of this stuff. Better soil health. We got to have cover crops. And so I just applaud you and your family for being on the forefront of this stuff, and would love to stay in touch with you and get some updates on these projects as time goes on for the water table.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. And I think, like you said, just being able to do new things. I think we've had a lot of support just from partnerships, and when we started some of those partnerships, we didn't really think that much of them. We thought, well, this is a good opportunity, so we're going to take it. But as we look back on our career so far, we think about where would we be if we said no? Where would we be if we would have gone a different route? And so we attribute a lot of success that we might have to learning from others, and I guess that's why we're also committed to doing some of these projects and helping and doing our own research and letting people use that, because it's important to us. And so if we want to use it, we gotta be a part of it and share it and tell our story, and hopefully encourage people to do the same, to work on making it work, figuring it out how to make it work.
Yep, for sure. So thanks for being with us today on the Water Table and for telling your story and, just what's going on in your family farm and what's happening in rural Iowa. And we'll stay in touch. Appreciate it very much.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today on the Water Table. You can find us at watertable.ag. Find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. And you can also find the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms.